What's going on, everyone? This is Mitch. Hope y'all have had a great Tuesday and a great work week so far. I'm going to break down some things. I'm really starting to think next week's weather has the potential to be a little flip-floppy. Trying to figure out what's going to go on in the eastern U.S. is going to be a big question mark here. And, if you look at your 10-day forecast on your weather apps and things, I'm sure you've noticed, if you've been looking at it a lot, that they've kind of trended a little bit warmer and they've kind of flip-flopped a lot. So next week's pattern is going to be very tricky as far as they're going to be. There's going to be any kind of cold front. Who's going to be cold? Who's going to be hot? And there's a lot to figure out as we get into our last week of October and getting into Halloween, and then obviously getting into November. We can't really see that far out into November to an accuracy point of view. But as we get into next week, we'll start to know what's going to happen kind of the first week or two into November. But we're just going to talk about some things. There's nothing crazy going on. It still remains calm. It's been like that for the entire month of October, besides a severe weather event that happened, what was last week. But thank you all who have continued to view my content anyways. If you guys have not subscribed, hit the subscribe button. Y'all got anything I can pray for, put it in the comments. It gives me an opportunity to pray for you guys, and it gives others the opportunity to do so too. Thank you all for tuning in. Let's get rolling here. So we're going to really focus on the GFS. We're not really going to look at the Euro. What we're going to look at here is moving forward. So this is starting Thursday morning. We have a little bit of leftover dry air in place. So a nice fall air mass. But as you move into Friday morning, you notice it begins to move away. There's another reinforcing shot of some dry air that moves through. It's more southeast oriented, or more just to the east coast. Areas in Texas and the western areas of the deep south, talking about Texas, Arkansas, Louisiana, and parts of Mississippi, won't experience much of this. But it's starting to look like we'll get a brief reinforcing shot of dry air. These are dew points, not temperatures. Of some dry air for the weekend, which would make for a nice Saturday and a pretty decent Sunday temperature-wise. Now, you notice for you folks up here in the New England and the northern Ohio Valley, you guys kind of remain in some nice weather throughout the early part of next week. What happens next week, though, is a big, big question. As you have a surge of tropical moisture, I wouldn't call it tropical, just high humidity, a lot more basically more humid air surges more north into the all the way up into the Ohio Valley, and this has the potential to bring some uncomfortable conditions as we get into our last week of October. Now, there will be a big time battle of air masses that really sets up, especially maybe late next week, as portions of the New England area and northern areas of the Northeast and even some areas of the Mid-Atlantic could remain in a more fall air mass. But there's going to be a sharp boundary that sets up that who experiences the nice weather and who experiences more late summer-like weather. And unfortunately, I mentioned last week that maybe we were going to enter more of a consistent fall pattern. Well, if the GFS comes true, then that means that it's going to get humid again next week. We don't know this for sure, as the GFS and all models are trying to figure out what this cold front is going to do. Now, you back it up here, and it's basically just a little bit of cool air from the Pacific Trough that gets kind of cut up in the currents here and is able to unload a little bit on the northeast and bring some cooler air. Before, this was looking like it was going to dip a little bit further and really going to give us a nice shot of some fall air. But that has since trended away and has continued to do so over the last couple of days. But as we get into midway next week, there's another huge cold front. And this is still up in the air. But another huge cold front that really sets up and tries to make east. But it fights off almost like an Atlantic ridge. And then it gets cut off from the main northern flow and almost turns into basically some kind of cut off low, if you will. But maybe another big time air mass coming up as we get into our first few days in November. But this is 324 hours out. It's too far out to really worry about. But if you look here, we're getting into this weekend. There's a little bit of this front that moves through that might bring in some rain showers. Honestly, welcomed rain for areas as we get into Friday for the southeast and mid-Atlantic, northeast. It's starting to get pretty dry. for certain areas. I know my area has not seen a lot of rain since, I don't know, last week. But going into early next week, big time storm system potentially in the Midwest area. And then you get into midway next week, around this time next week, and then a big time cold front sets up. This is a slow moving cold front that has a potential to unload a lot of rain, but this is still 8 to 9 days out. Still tricky to figure out. You notice it's starting to show a little bit of a tropical activity here near the Bahamas. I wouldn't pay any attention to that till right now. But you notice this cold front, or this piece of energy, gets cut off and almost turns into a cut-off low. This kind of spins and just it's just an odd-looking setup. Dumps a ton of rain on the southeast, but it's very far out. It's past 10 days out. Very, very, very hard to really take that as if it's going to happen because it's so far out. But you look at the whole grand scheme pattern across North America. As we're moving forward here, what happens here is you have what's left of our trough that's been delivering really nice weather for the eastern U.S. this past weekend and this week so far. This begins to move out, and that's what this is here, dip in the jet stream. A ridge of high pressure, ridging, that's going all the way up into Canada begins to build. Now you see these little pieces of energy here. They basically Pacific cool air that's kind of getting cut off from the mainstream here in this trough, and this is it's almost like a cutoff low that's you can call a cold front, but this helps to basically deliver maybe another shot of cool air as we get into Friday, and that's actually what's going to be responsible for another shot of fall air. Now, I'm not talking about below average fall air. This will bring average to even still slightly above average temperatures for the for a lot of the southeast. The mid-Atlantic up in the northeast will feel a lot more cooler, but it still will be a nice air mass for a good chunk of the eastern U.S. But moving forward here, trying to figure out what happens here as this kind of goes away and we kind of lose the fall air mass, then big time ridging across the middle part to the eastern part of the country begins to build all the way up in Canada. This is a big time ridge building all the way up into Canada. And really, finally, you get that Pacific trough that's way out here that really begins to move over the western U.S. What happens after this is really a big question mark, because this ridging is trying to fight off this cold front. But it's a really tough pattern to figure out. You back it up to this frame right here, and you're thinking, well, what about this? Well, there is no Arctic source from this cold front this weekend, so therefore it's not really a big deal at all. It's just reinforcing a little bit more dry air in the region, and it just makes it feel comfortable. But it's not a real true cool air mass, kind of like what even the one we experienced Sunday into Monday, where it was really cool. It's been really chilly in the mornings, even where I am in South Carolina. It really wasn't a true Arctic air mass. What you need with a true Arctic air mass is a whole cross-polar flow, meaning you have Arctic air coming all the way from way up in the northern hemisphere and crossing all the way across the U.S. That's when you have them Arctic fronts that really unload below average temperatures. We're not really seeing that. So, in that case, the 6 to 10 day temperature outlook, this goes from the 25th to the 29th, is well above average for the middle part of the country and still above average for the eastern U.S. You notice the far western areas of the U.S. is below average potentially because that Pacific trough is getting influenced by that. That's why the Pacific has a chance to see multiple storm systems. It's going to be riding a jet stream that's going to be funneling in to the western U.S. You look at the 8 to 14 day range, which goes basically through Halloween through the 2nd of November, still calling for above average temperatures for the entire middle part of the country to the eastern part of the country. So, yeah, for me, it kind of sucks, but, but I don't mind a little bit of warm temperatures as long as we ain't getting above 85 degrees in November and late October. That's when it's just like, all right, man, it needs to cool back down. But you're getting into Thursday, still comfortable air mass across, not really too cold for anybody. And then, we get into Thursday afternoon. warms into the 80s for a lot of people, starts to really warm up, even up in the New York City, the big cities along the eastern U.S., climbing back into the 70s. And then the air mass begins to reload, and you notice much cooler temperatures across the interior areas of the Northeast, Mid-Atlantic, and Ohio Valley. And notice how warm the temperatures are right ahead of a pretty weak cold front that moves through. So you get into Saturday morning and a lot more pleasant of an atmosphere in the mornings, but still for you folks in Mississippi, points west, and even southern areas of Alabama and Georgia, it's not going to be that cool at all. So I think a real nice day Saturday is in store for everybody, especially areas a little bit further north in the southeast. But for people who are really influenced by this cool air in the northeast, it could be a chilly weekend. But really going forward here, there's going to be a battle of air masses, especially we look at here. Let's go a little bit forward here. Look at next Tuesday afternoon, and this is pretty far out. You got 40s right here, but look at this stout cutoff. Washington, D.C. is pushing almost 80 degrees, and then New York City, Philadelphia is only in the 50s and 40s for highs. That's a good example of a pretty stout cutoff in air masses. It's showing, the last week of October, we could potentially warm well into the 80s. Some areas pushing 90 degrees. So things could change next week, but it's starting to look like next week it's going to get warm again. So that's all I got, guys. Thank you all for tuning in. Y'all have a blessed night, and thank you all for the amazing support.